Hey everybody, Spooky Marshmallow here, and this is the second podcast that I am going to be doing for this channel with my special co-host, MiriMassacre. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So the name of this podcast is I'm with Spooky. And so this podcast is going to be about true crime cases. In the upcoming months, though, however, most of what we're going to be talking about is missing persons. A lot of this is missing persons or people that have been cold case files. That's kind of like the theme for the upcoming months. But it's going to change. It's not going to be a forever thing. Like, we're going to cover different types of true crime topics and things like that. True crime is like a huge open thing right now. And there's all kinds of things that you can talk about. Okay, so right now, our first topic is going to be called the I-70 Strangler. And so the I-70 Strangler is the nickname of an unidentified American serial killer who killed at least 12 gay men in Indiana and Ohio between June 1980 and October 1991. And the reason they call him that is because their bodies were dumped near Interstate 70 or I-70. Officially, it's unresolved, but it is believed that the serial killer, Herb Baumeister, was the actual killer. He is now deceased, but they believe that he was the I-70 Strangler. And so I decided to do this one for this month because of, June was Pride Month. This will be airing in July, but we are recording this in June. And it's something that is just absolutely atrocious, and I feel like not enough has been told about this story. And, you know, there's a lot of people that have no idea what this even is, and I think that's sad. I think more people should know about this and be aware that this did happen, and it happened here in our state. And it sickens me, but I just feel like it needs to be put out there. Because I feel like, you know, there's so many gay individuals that are getting murdered or tortured just for the simple fact that they are gay. And it's not being talked about, I feel like. I feel like it's just being brushed under the rug. And I really want to bring that out, that, you know, that this is still going on, by the way. It's still happening. It's just not being talked about. So anyway, so let's get to the story of the I-70 Strangler, Herb Baumeister. Bleh, I cannot move my lips. And I just want to say, before I continue on any further, that I apologize for any names that I butcher throughout this podcast, because I think I'm, okay at some words, but some of these names, I really do apologize for if I butcher the names. I really do. So, moving on. So, Herb would choose young boys as his victims that he would meet in gay bars and similar establishments, all within a 4-block radius in Indianapolis. And then all of the victims would be either found naked or partially naked near I-70, dumped in rivers, streams, and ditches. And they had been strangled to death, hence the nickname, the I-70 Strangler. In total, 12 men were officially recorded as victims. There could have been more, but 12 were officially recorded. And so I am going to turn it over now to my partner, Miri, if you want to start with the first victim.
Alrighty, I can do that. The first victim, and again with myself as well, if I happen to mess up any of the names, please forgive me. It's not on purpose. Definitely not trying to disrespect anyone. But the first one here is Michael Petrie, who was 15, was discovered naked in rural Hamilton County, Indiana on June 16, 1980. Despite his young age, he was a male prostitute who spent most of his time around Indianapolis gay bars. He was reported missing on June 7th, but 3 days later, he was observed in different parts of the city riding along in a stranger's car. The cause of death was established as strangulation, and there were no traces of drug or alcohol in his blood.
Wow, 15 years old and was a gay prostitute. Holy cow. You don't think those things like
sad.
Yeah, like you don't think that those
so
things
young.
happen, but it does. When I was reading through these victims, I was just stunned. Like I was just like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that at that age and that time that was going on." But once again, that is because it was covered up. It wasn't talked about. Okay, so the next one that we have is Maurice Taylor. He was 23 years old. He was found topless in July of 1982 in Weasel Creek in Hamilton County, just outside of Atlanta, Indiana. While his cause of death couldn't be definitively established, the coroner suspected that he too had been strangled. He was a vagrant who lived in the boiler room of an apartment complex in Indianapolis. And due to, him being homeless and everything, he offered sexual services around the gay bars, which I think that is a common thing among, even to this day. I feel like a lot of the homeless gay men that they do that. I could be wrong, but I kind of feel like that's still going on today. And females too. Not just men, but women too. He remained unidentified for 8 months since his mother, who was detained in a mental hospital, was unable to file a missing persons report. And that's a very sad tale right there.
That's devastating. That's so sad. All right, let's see. Our next on here is the Delvoyd Lee Baker, who was 14. An 8th grader was found semi-nude near a river in Hamilton County. While investigating his death, police located witnesses who stated that Baker was last seen on the evening of October 2nd in downtown Indianapolis, boarding a blue van driven by a young white man with a bushy mustache. The boy's parents told police that he had been riding his bike to the city center on the evening of his disappearance, from where he called home at 10:30 p.m. to inform them that he was going to be late because he wanted to go to the cinema. The statement concerned Baker's parents, who knew that he had no pocket money on him. It was later established that Baker had a 16-year-old friend, had been cruising the Indianapolis gay bars for the last 3 months, and according to his friend, he and Baker prostituted themselves for $20 to $23 per night. Due to several differences in comparison with other victims, being the youngest and the only black victim, Baker's homicide was considered to be unrelated by some policemen.
Holy crap. Oh my gosh. So in Delvoyd's story, he's 14 years old. He's with a 16-year-old buddy. They're pimping themselves out. And because he is black, some policemen believe that it's unrelated. And so they just, they're like, no, couldn't be part of the I-70 Strangler. But I call BS on that. I don't think...
100%.
Yeah, I don't think Herb had an actual, preference. He just wanted to kill. That's, yeah. I mean, and Delvoyd's case follows all of the other ones. He was a young male prostitute, and he was gay. It follows the same scenario as all the others, so why wouldn't it have been...
Right.
Yeah, it's just, that's sad. Okay,
He's
then...
in the same circles.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Because I could go on and on about this, and I really don't want to. So, I don't want to, stir up anything. So, Michael Andrew Riley, he was 22 and disappeared on May 28th, 1983, after visiting the Vogue. And the Vogue's a nightclub in Indianapolis, if you're not familiar with that. Or it was. Is it still open?
Yes, absolutely. 100% still
Okay.
here.
I wasn't sure. because I don't really hear anything about it anymore. He was last seen with an unfamiliar man with whom he had later left the Vogue with. His nude body was found in a ditch in Hancock County on June 5th. The autopsy determined that he had been strangled, with the perpetrator likely using a towel or a similar fabric. Interesting.
Next is Eric Allen Roger, who was 17, vanished on May 7th, 1985, with his shirtless body found a few days later near a stream in the rural Pueblo County, Ohio, east of Lewisburg. According to his parents, Roger was planning to attend interviews for a summer job on the day of his disappearance, but didn't attend any of them. His friends and relatives denied that he was gay, and later research indicated that Roger made many friends and acquaintances who were drug addicts or drug traffickers. Witnesses claimed that they had seen Eric at a bus stop in the early morning of March 7th, but instead of waiting on the bus, he accepted a ride from a passing car. When found, he had an apparent burn mark on his left shoulder and had been strangled with a rope.
Holy cow. So he moved on from his hands to a towel, now a rope. And that's interesting. Like, I wonder how the burn mark happened. That's pretty interesting. And also something else that's...
Sounds like he's escalating.
Yeah. And something else that was interesting too was that he, that people said he was not gay, but he did he hung around with drug users and drug dealers. So that's interesting right there, because, sometimes, that prostitutes run in that same circle. So that's interesting. Michael Allen Glenn, he was 29 when his body was found only in his underwear in a ditch near Eaton, Ohio, in August of 1986. He lived separately from his parents in a trailer park located on the outskirts of Indianapolis and worked as a handyman. So the exact date of his disappearance couldn't be established. Strangulation marks, possibly from a rope, were found on his neck. He was identified 3 years after his discovery with the help of fingerprinting. So it took them 3 years to identify him. That's so sad.
Yeah, that's horrible. Imagine being this person's family and just like they're missing for that long, and you just have to go with it because you have no idea. It's so sad. You have James Robbins, who was 21, went missing October 15th, 1987 at around 10 p.m. Shortly after leaving his mother's home in Indianapolis and walked to the southern part of the city. 2 days later, his naked corpse bearing strangulation marks was found in a ditch in rural Shelby County near I-70 south of Louisville. While investigating his murder, police located 2 witnesses who gave conflicting information. One claimed that they had seen a red Jeep Wrangler Renegade near the crime scene, while another said that the car was a Chevrolet Blazer.
That's interesting. Those are 2 way different vehicles. Yeah, so that's interesting. Sure. Okay, the next one is Jean-Paul Talbot. Like the previous victims, was found strangled in May of '89, and his body had been dumped near a stream in Defiance County, Ohio.
Stephen L. Elliott, who's 26, his corpse was found in his underwear, and he was found August 1989 in rural Pueblo County, Ohio, again near I-70. He had been strangled, presumably with a rope. Elliott's father told police that when his son came out as gay in 1979, he had then left the family household and became involved in prostitution, developing an alcohol addiction.
Wow. Next up is Clay Russell Boatman. He was 32. Excuse me. And he was a licensed practical nurse. He disappeared in August 1990 after leaving his Richmond apartment to visit Our Place, a local gay bar. His body, showing signs of strangulation, was found in a ditch by a group of children near Eaton, Ohio. When interviewed about his life, Boatman's family denied that he was homosexual. So I'm thinking maybe he just hadn't come out yet to them that he was gay.
Or I feel like in that time period, because it was like early 90s, that it was less accepted than I will say like than now. So I feel like sometimes people tried to like cover that up because like they feel like they didn't want to be looked down upon, I guess is what I would say, even though obviously we know that shouldn't change how anybody looks at you. I feel like, some people may have said that just so they didn't feel like they didn't look bad, I guess, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, yeah. And considering that he was a licensed practical nurse, like maybe he felt like his job would be in danger if, if a patient found him or, one of his fellow coworkers found out or something like that.
Exactly, for sure. We have Thomas Clevenger Jr., who vanished without a trace at the end of August 1990, and his semi-nude corpse was later found in an abandoned railroad track out near Greenville, Ohio. Clevenger grew up in a poor neighborhood of Indianapolis, and due to his rocky upbringing, he started committing crimes and drinking at an early age. At the age of 14, he was attacked and then stabbed his deputy headmaster, and during his school years, he was diagnosed with an intellectual disability because of which he had problems reading and writing. Shortly before his death, he engaged in prostitution near gay bars to earn money, a fact denied by his mother and sister.
So, once again, a case, where the family denied, they denied that he was gay and that he was prostituting. It's the family may, just have chose not to believe it. Who knows? Who knows?
Right.
Otto Gary Becker. He is the oldest one at the age of 42. Pardon me. His body was found in a ditch next to a gravel road in rural Henry County in Indiana on October 7th of 1991. While investigating his murder, police found several witnesses who claimed to have seen Becker in a car with two other men earlier that day. Two other men. That's interesting. They were driving north on I-70 near Indianapolis. According to them, one of the men was holding Becker down while the other was driving. The witnesses were taken to the police station and shown photographs of various criminals convicted of kidnapping and murder charges, but none of them matched the alleged abductors.
That's wild. So, for the investigation, there was a task force of 8 officers that were created by the Indianapolis Police in 1982 to investigate the crimes. Following the discovery of Riley's body in June 1983, 4 more men were included in the list of potential victims. 25-year-old Gary Davis, 27-year-old Dennis Brotzich, 21-year-old John Roach, and 22-year-old Daniel McNeve. Like the other victims, they were all homosexual, visited gay bars, and were killed in Indianapolis between August 1981 and May 1983. In 1983, the FBI joined the investigation with profilers, suggesting that the offender showed volatile behavior when committing the murders. Near the end, it was determined that there were at least 2 different perpetrators operating independently of one another. Because of this, Davis Brotzich, I'm sorry, I'm probably murdering that. It's not good. Roach and McNeve were removed from the list. According to the FBI, Davis, Brotzich, Roach, and McNeve's killer was a white man between the ages of 20 and 30, worked in job requiring low-skilled labor, was a fan of military paraphernalia, and led a healthy lifestyle. In his everyday life, he expressed homophobic views, but was secretly a latent homosexual who committed the murders out of shame and self-hatred. The other victims, according to investigators, were killed by a white man, about 45 years of age, likely overweight, and had a high-paying job and was well respected in his community. They also concluded that the killer may be married but has no intimate relationship with his wife, likely because of his attraction to adolescent boys and young men. He feels shame and guilt that, in addition to possibly destroying his career and reputation, would result in a deep hatred and subsequent murder.
And that makes perfect sense as to why he was never caught during this time. Yeah, it's set up just like a Lifetime movie, y'all. Like, seriously, like, it's, yeah, all the things that they were saying is all stuff that makes perfect sense when you piece out each individual that was found. The way that they described the killer, it makes perfect sense. So let's move on next to initial suspects. And I find that this is so interesting, what I'm about to tell you. Yeah, it's, when I was reading through information on this, I was just amazed. It's so interesting. It's so interesting. And like I said before at the beginning of the podcast, I cannot believe that this hasn't been discussed more and it hasn't been brought out into the public more. But anyway, let's move on to this. So, initial suspects. So one of the first suspects was a 47-year-old Duncan Patterson. He was a Florida native. And in the fall of 82, he was arrested in Indianapolis on charges of statutory rape against young boys. Nasty. And shortly after his arrest, a friend of Delvoye Baker claimed that he had gotten into Patterson's van. Patterson later admitted that it was true and that he had paid Baker $20 for oral sex, which the two had in a hotel room. He denied killing the boy, however, claiming that he had taken Baker after sex to the Indianapolis Central Library, where he let him go and saw him enter another van. Patterson's testimony was corroborated by a witness who had seen Baker leave the van, go up to the library steps to talk to a man he apparently knew, before the two got into the older man's car. To assess his credibility, Patterson was asked to take a polygraph test, and he agreed and successfully passed. While he was convicted on charges of child molestation, he was then excluded, though, as a suspect, since he passed the poly and he had a witness that saw Baker get out of his car alive. Absolutely disgusting, though. I just want to throw that in there. In 1983, a resident of Carmel, Gus Cato, was briefly detained and interrogated for the murders in Indianapolis, but was quickly released after investigators found no evidence linking him to any other crimes. I feel that's interesting, and I'd kind of like to know what made them go after Gus in the first place. If he was not linked to any other crimes, what made them think he was a suspect to begin with? That's a good question. Another more viable...
That was my first thought.
Yeah, like, why did you pick him up? It just, I don't know, that's a big mystery. Another more viable suspect was convicted serial killer Larry... sorry, my mouth decided to stop working. Larry Eyler, who was found guilty of murdering 21 adolescent boys and young men in Indiana and Illinois. He was currently on death row for the 1986 murder of 16-year-old Daniel Bridges. However, there's a lot of inconsistencies of Eyler and that of the I-70 Strangler. Eyler's killings occurred over a year, and he killed his victims with a knife. But the I-70 Strangler's victims were strangled over a period of 11 years. Both killers targeted homosexuals and dumped their bodies near interstate highways. Several victims were found near Richmond, in Indiana, of course, where Eyler's mother lived. It was suggested that the killings were linked to those of Eyler. While awaiting execution at the Pontiac Correctional Center in November of 90, Eyler, with his lawyer, Kathleen Zellner, invited the Illinois and Indiana authorities to negotiate a plea deal. In exchange for commuting his sentence, he would provide information that would help solve more than 20 murders. which he alleged to have committed with the help of his lover, Robert Little, a professor at IU. Prosecutors in 7 of the 9 counties agreed to the bargain, and the sole exception of Cook County, Illinois, where Eyler had been convicted of killing Bridges in 1986. So Indiana says yes, Illinois says no. Shortly thereafter, the Vermilion County Attorney's Office reopened its investigation into the murder of 23-year-old Stephen Agan, who had been stabbed to death on December 19th, 1982. Fearing new charges, on December 4th, 1990, Eyler wrote a 17-page confession concerning the murder of Agan, which he claimed was committed with the help of Little. The prosecutors offered a plea deal, and according to which Eyler would plead guilty and receive a 60-year sentence. Eyler agreed, and at his April 1991 trial, he became a key witness and testified against Little. However, no physical evidence was uncovered that implicated Little, who claimed that in December of 82, he had gone to visit his mother in Florida. After 7 hours of deliberation, he was found not guilty by jury verdict, and Eyler's testimony was ruled inconclusive. 2 days after his death on March 8, 1994, Eyler's lawyer announced at a press conference that his posthumous confession would be made public. In it, Eyler admitted that he had killed 21 young men between 1982 and 1984, 4 of which were committed with Little's knowledge or assistance. The list included John Roach and Daniel McNeve, but none of the I-70 Strangler's victims. Aside from these murders, Eyler remains a suspect in 3 other murders committed in Indiana, Kentucky, and Wisconsin. Whew! That's a lot to take in. So, the whole time Eyler is, saying that his friend Little is in with it on him and helped him do all this and that and the other, and so they go to court, and Little is found not guilty. Eyler is executed, and there's still victims out there that still that he is suspected to have killed them, but there's no proof. Wow, that's insane. There needs to be some sort of movie or Lifetime show about this. Seriously.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Just this little story alone would make a good Lifetime true crime movie. Or an episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, yes, for sure. A little side note, too, now that you said the name and looking at this information, I don't know if anybody else that'll hear this has heard of, but Kathleen Zellner, if you've watched the series on Netflix called Making a Murderer, or To Make a Murderer, it's actually a really good show. And she is also the attorney for the man in that case. It's definitely worth the watch.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, she's really big out there. Her name, so as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, I heard that. So, yeah.
Holy cow, I had no idea. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I'm going to have to watch it now because that is, that's messed up. That's interesting. I'm going to look into that.
Oh. It's definitely, it'll get to you. It will. There were nights that I was up just wow, this is insane. How can the system be like this? It was definitely, I don't know, definitely a good watch. I recommend 10 out of 10. For sure.
Yeah, I've heard about it, but I've just never watched the show, which is weird because I'm a true crime fanatic. So it's really weird that I hadn't watched it, but I've heard of it. So now I'm going to have to watch it just for the Zellner reference. Wow. Okay, so let's move on to the monster, the so-called I-70 Strangler, whom they really believe was Herb Baumeister. In February 1998, an Indianapolis resident contacted police and claimed that a businessman, Herb Baumeister, was the mysterious man photographed leaving the Vogue with one of the I-70 Strangler victims, Michael Riley. Prior to his suicide in 1996, Baumeister was the prime suspect in the murders of at least 7 men who were killed between 1993 and 1995 in Indianapolis, whose remains were later found buried on his property. So there was even more people that he killed and buried on his property. After this information surfaced, Baumeister was named as the prime suspect in the I-70 Strangler case. According to investigators, he stopped dumping the bodies of his victims in 91 after he bought the Fox Hollow farm. Oh my gosh, you guys. So there is a show, I'm not sure if it's still on Netflix or Amazon, where a paranormal team goes to Fox Hollow Farm. And I could do a whole nother episode on Fox Hollow Farm itself. It's messed up. Oh my gosh. Anyway, it's a place here in Indiana.
I'm pretty sure I've seen that.
Yeah, it's
I've heard of that.
Yeah. Anyway, so Herb bought Fox Hollow Farm, and he used that as his burial site for his subsequent victims.
As of 2021, there is no physical evidence that has linked Baumeister and the I-70 Strangler victims. Ted Fleischenker, editor-in-chief of a gay newspaper, has claimed that Baumeister wasn't responsible for the killings and accused the police officials of police misconduct, saying they used him as a convenient excuse to close the cases ahead of municipal election while the real killers remain at large.
I call bull on that. I believe the story that Baumeister bought Fox Hollow for the purpose of taking his victims there, killing them, and then burying them on the property. It just makes more sense. Because it's such a huge place, and I think he felt like, hey, I could do this forever now, because I have all this wide open space, I have all this land, and I can bury the bodies. But one thing that doesn't make sense to me, though, and I think that maybe that might not be the case, is because he was leaving them by the highway on purpose. He knew the locations where he dumped the bodies, he knew they would be found. So why would you suddenly go from wanting these bodies to be found to not wanting these bodies to be found? So...
Right, and...
Go ahead.
I definitely also, I don't know, not to pick sides, but I feel like that does happen too, though. There are times I feel like, not to be controversial, but, sometimes people will just say, oh, this is the answer for this, so that we don't have to deal with this, or we can look better in the public eye. So I feel like it's definitely possibly still up for debate. And I'm also still not so sure that it wasn't more than one person, just because of how many there were, if that makes, sense.
Right. So you think that Baumeister may have had a partner in crime?
If it was him, I think there might have been more than one person, yeah.
And that would make sense, considering that in 2 or 3 of the victims' stories that were told, there were 2 men that were witnessed. Just like the one where there were 2 men in a car, and one was holding down the person while the other one was driving.
Right, or like the change in pattern of things too. I feel like that definitely could just mean that there are just 2 separate people.
Right.
Too. It would make sense for that.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I never thought of that, and you're absolutely correct. Yeah. That would make sense. And so then that leads to another mystery is, if Baumeister did have a partner, who is it?
Exactly.
And that would mean that yeah, then that would mean that they're possibly still at large. But
Right.
but the thing is, like, no other killings in that fashion have become public knowledge. Right now, we're dealing more with shootings than anything right now in Indianapolis. Across Indiana, period, I should say. Just random people getting killed. And it's in large numbers. It's ridiculous. And it's, it just makes you wonder, like, maybe since Baumeister committed suicide, maybe the other person did too. Out of guilt or fear that they were going to get caught. Who knows?
Never know.
Wow, that is crazy, crazy stuff, but exciting stuff. I don't know about you, but I just think it's super exciting. Like, not to sound like cold or anything, but Indiana's not exactly an exciting state. You know what I'm talking about? Like, we are one of the most boring states in the entire world, or world of the United States, I should say. Nothing like crazy like the I-70 Strangler tale as far as true crime goes happens here, or at least it's not reported. So to hear a story like this, of this happening here in Indiana, not only was it like an eye-opener, but it was also terrifying to know that that happened, but also it was kind of exciting. It was like, oh my gosh, something exciting happened here. Like, not exciting, like, I mean exciting, like, as in a true crime sense. Not exciting as in, oh, there was a serial killer here that killed people. That's not what I meant by that.
Not because it's so cool, but yeah, right.
Right, yeah. Just, you know, because
more so that it's just very big, because it's very not used to this.
Right, yeah. Like, I feel like it's a high-profile story, but it didn't get as much hype as it should have. And I feel like had this come out more back in the early 90s, because I don't recall ever hearing about this, and maybe, but I didn't pay attention, to the news because I was a teenager. But I just feel like, I don't know, there should have been more public knowledge about this story, and I feel like the victims deserve more than what they've received in the public eye. It's a shame. It's a shame. It's a very sad and sickening story. It really is. Herb Baumeister was a sick son of a bitch. I'm just gonna say that right now.
No, I agree. Yeah.
He's a sicko. Okay, so I am so glad to put that story to rest. And so if you were very pleased with this podcast, and this is just the first one, and you're ready for more, you're going to get more. The next case that we will be talking about in August, holy cow, you guys. It left me shook. I am going to just say that. It shook me to the core, you guys. It's about Lola Catherine Fry, but we will be talking about that in our August podcast. So stay tuned for that coming up in August. And I want to thank so much my co-host and partner in podcast, MiriMassacre.
Thank you so much again for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And I cannot wait until we get rolling on this and we get to the next podcast. So I'm going to end it on this note because my throat is killing me right now from all the talking because I'm not used to this. So I am going to end it here. And thank you so much for listening and watching. And this is Spooky Marshmallow saying, remember, stay spooky, my friends.